Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Gods and Myths of Northern Europe, Part 11, The Germanic Gods. Where we last left off, we split the chapter in two because my computer is getting too hot and stuff like that. But let's get back into it. Tacitus tells us that the Hermundari and the Chatti sacrificed to Mars and Mercury in return for victory. There is little doubt that Mercury represented the Germanic god Woden at the time when Tacitus wrote. In England, the same god Woden gave his name to the fourth day of the week, Wednesday, the day which in France is called Mercredi after the Roman god. Just as Odin was looked on as the divine ancestor of the Swedes, so Woden was believed to be the founder of many royal dynasties. Most of the Anglo-Saxon kings look back to him as their divine ancestor. The reason for his identification with Mercury will be discussed more fully in a later chapter, page 140, which I already kind of explained in the previous episode, so yeah. At the time of Tacitus, however, there was reason to believe that the Roman god of war, Mars, was identified not with Woden but with another Germanic god, Zeus. Odin, in fact, appears to be the successor of both Woden and Zeus, retaining some of the qualities and attributes. Something just fell in my room. And attributes of both of these gods. In Snorri's account, Zeus appears as Tyr. He is only a shadowy figure, but Snorri mentions men prayed to him for victory, and also that he was renowned for his wisdom as well as for his valor. Zeus in his day must have been a very great power among the heathen Germans. The third day of the week, sacred in Rome to Mars, was called after him throughout the Teutonic world. So that against Mardi in France, we have Tuesday in England. In Old Norse, his name was used as a synonym for God, and Odin bore among his titles of Sigtyr, the Tyr, or god of victory. The name Zeus is related to the Greek Zeus, to the Roman Jupiter, who was originally Dies Pietar, father Dies. All three are thought to be derived from Deus, the Indo-Germanic word for God, which stands also for the shining heaven and the light of day. It is probable that Zeus was the supreme sky god of the Germans as well as their god of battle. Although Odin had in the main taken the place of Zeus at the close of the heathen period, memories of the early battle gods still lingered. In one of the Edda poems dealing with spells used in battle, men were told to carve runes of victory giving the name of Tyr. We have what may be instances of this name on weapons. A helmet from Negu in Austria bears an inscription in North Italic letters of the 2nd century BC, which has been thought by some scholars to give Tiwa an archaic form of the god's name. A spear from the Kola bears the rune which is the initial of the god's name. Another symbol resembling this rune, so small that it could hardly have been noticeable even when new, has been detected on a spear found in the Anglo-Saxon cemetery of the 6th century in Holdborough, Kent. These may be signs of the ancient Germanic war god, cut by those who wished to claim his help and protection in battle. Terrible though the rites associated with Zeus were, it seems that he was no mere crude deity of slaughter. Among the titles given to him in inscriptions of the Roman period, we found Mars Thingsus. This must mean that Zeus was associated with the Thing, the assembly of the people held to settle disputes and to establish the law. Just as the Lord of Hosts, who gave victory in battle to Moses, was the same God who delivered to him the tablets of the law, so Zeus appears to have been the protector of law and order in the community as well as the ruler over the realm of war. Tacitus tells us that no man might be flogged, imprisoned, or put to death among the Germans, save by their priests, in obedience to the god which they believed to preside over battle. If the god of battle punished criminals, then he must surely have been regarded as the supporter of order and justice. This idea never wholly disappeared in the North, and it may We notice that the place where the official sword duel, the Holmganga, was fought was close beside the site of the chief assembly of Iceland, where the important lost cases were held. The appeal to the sword as an arbiter between men has a long and impressive history among Germanic peoples. According to Tacitus, they were accustomed to use the duel as a form of augury. They used before a battle to secure a captive from this enemy, and to match him against a champion of their own. In this way, they tested the luck of their other side, and the result was held to foreshadow that of the battle to come. Records from the early history of the Germans have many references to single combat between two champions, while behind them the opposing armies waited and watched. The spirit of such a combat is well expressed in the 8th century by Paul the Deacon, who wrote in a history of the Lombards. See how many there are on both sides. What need is there that so great a multitude perish? Let us join, he and I, in single combat, and may that one of us to whom God may have willed to give the victory, have and possess all the people, safe and entire. History of the Longobards, Volume 41, Folk's translation. We know that the Germans were accustomed to take a solemn oath on their weapons, and that this was an ancient custom. We established in heathen times that this is the accordance with the idea of the god of battle as the supreme arbiter, and it is not difficult to comprehend the effectiveness of such an oath. A man's safety and life depend on the reliability of his weapons, and fighting was a tricky business at best. A broken oath which had been made on sword or spear might result in a failure at the moment of crisis. That a man's own weapon should turn against him is one of the more frightening of the curses which could be pronounced against an enemy. It is probably significant that one myth about Tyr, which has survived in the pages of Snorri's, concerns the binding of the wolf Fenrir, the adversary of the gods. Only Tyr was brave enough to feed him, and willing to sacrifice his hand in order that the monster should be bound. Later on, the wolf is the special adversary of Odin in Ragnarok. It seems likely that in earlier Germanic myths it was Tyr who was matched against him. Snorri tells us that Tyr was killed by Garm, a hound of the underworld, who may well be Fenrir under another name. That is true. There are a lot of connections between them. At the time of Tacitus, the Semnones, a warlike people who were later known as the Alemanni, lived between the Rhine and the Oder. The Rhine is a river in Germany. They worshipped a god called God and ruler of all, Deus Regnator Omnium. In AD 92, their king visited Rome, and Tacitus may well have learned about their religious customs from him or from one of his companions. He tells us that the Semnones gathered yearly in the sacred wood, which other tribes related to them, and that in this place, hallowed by the auguries of their forefathers in the ancient awe, they witnessed a human sacrifice. Whoever entered the wood had to be bound with a cord as a sign of humility before the god, and if he fell, he might not get to his feet, but had to roll on the ground. This appears to emphasize the power of the god to bind his followers, as Tyr bound the wolf. The idea of binding is found associated with Odin as a war god, and more about his will to be said later. We cannot be certain that Tyr was in fact the god of the Semnones, but it seems most probable that he was the supreme deity worshipped in the wood. It is also possible that the god of the Saxons, known as Saxnot, was the name of the war god Tyr. He is mentioned along with Woden and Thunar as a god who had to be renounced when they were baptized, an early renunciation formula. He must have been an important deity to be placed alongside the other two, and he was evidently the same god whose name, Sigsnit, is given as that of the founder of the dynasty of the Saxon kings in Essex. Saxnot could originally have been Saz-Ignot, sword companion, and this is a fitting name for a war god in whose honor swords were wielded and to whom swords were sacrificed. The worship of Tyr under the name may thus have been brought into Essex when the Saxons came over to Britain. Tews was also known in England under the name of Tew or Tig, as in as is implied by a few early forms of place names, like Tewin in Hertfordshire and Tuesley in Surrey. At Tewstow on Edge Hill, 7 miles from Banbury, a red horse was cut on the hill slope and was scoured, scoured every Palm Sunday until the end of the 18th century. It is possible that here there was a place once sacred to the god, and that the horse was associated with them. In Zeus, we have an early Germanic war god, an ancestor of Odin. He had great powers, and extensive sacrifices were made to him. He was one it was a one-handed god, and since a one-handed figure wielding a weapon is seen among Bronze Age rock engravings in Scandinavia, it has been suggested that his worship may go back to the early times in the north, and that the myth of the god biting the wolf is of great antiquity. Dimsdale believes that another version has been preserved in the history of the Roman hero, Mucius Scaevola, who willingly sacrificed his hand to save his people from destruction. Certainly, Tews differs in one respect from Woden, who seems to have taken over his position as god of battle later in heathen period. Tews was associated with law and justice, whereas Woden and Odin are approached on many occasions for fickleness and treachery. While Odin is renowned for wisdom and cunning, he is not represented as in any way concerned with justice among men. To find the reason for his change in the character of the war god, it would be necessary to return to the Scandinavia Odin, and to consider some of his companions and followers in Asgard and on Earth. Whew. So that was the Germanic gods. When we next show up, we'll be reading the Valkyries of Odin. So next Friday, stay tuned for that. And Saturday and Sunday, I will be continuing my Enigmarella series. So I'll see you then, and have a good day.